Hello, everybody. Good morning. If you've watched this channel at all, you probably know my opinion on AI. I personally think that artificial intelligence in its current state is just a new lever that billionaire tech companies have to shove more crap that we don't need down our throats. And while I do think that AI, the technology, does have great implications that can be made on health and education and government, making it more efficient, and even defense in certain aspects, I think the only levers we've seen it being used in are companies that are literally stealing data from their users and using it to maybe turn up the profit meter by a 5 or 10% margin, while at the same time effectively destroying the world. Now, how do we fix this? I think personally, while I don't believe in big government, and I don't believe particularly in big government in tech, because a lot of the regulators and the lawmakers that make the rules typically don't know how computers work, I do think that there do need to be laws put in place to stop the exploitation of users, and in particular of creators when it comes to generative AI model training. Now, a 256-page report just came out from Congress by a joint bipartisan task force that evaluates all of the issues and makes recommendations with their key findings on how AI effectively impacts global society from a health standpoint, education, civil liberties, privacy, intellectual property, among others. In this video, I want to go into the two primary areas that I find to be the most important and how some of the findings aren't really findings at all, and my concerns about the potential conflicts of interest that are left open in this report. The two issues here are data privacy and intellectual property that I think are one and the same, but they do differentiate them a little bit in the report. The whole point of this report is it was a joint task force by Congress with a bipartisan group of legislators, and they're trying to figure out, what are the current issues with AI in its current state, and what laws need to be made to make AI either less invasive, more effective, or just to have a less, detrimental impact onto society. Now, I do want to make a couple things clear. I do not normally agree with the idea of, senators and other people making laws as it pertains to software, because typically those people don't tend to understand how software works. But at the same time, in an unregulated market that AI currently is, there's really no laws that govern what AI can and can't do. I think that something needs to be done. And I am happy that a congressional task force has gone forward and done some amount of study to figure out what needs to be done. So here we have the data privacy section. They go into a bit of a background. As AI systems amass and analyze vast amounts of data, there is increasing risks of private information being accessed without information. Training algorithms identify patterns within the data and produce a set of instructions or a model that can be used with new data. Now, these models are often trained on diverse data sets that include text from books, websites, and otherwise. They can be deployed in sensitive contexts, including in healthcare settings that rely on sensitive data. So the primary issue here, if you are training AI indiscriminately on user data, there is an opportunity for the data to not only be leaned towards sensitive information that is taken from a person, but for that information to then be revealed through data that is generated by the model, right? So if you train your data set on a particular set of data that just contains the fact that, John Smith happens to have a particular disease he doesn't want people to know about, if he doesn't want that publicly revealed, it could accidentally be revealed by AI systems. The problem I have with this paragraph is that it doesn't even really address the fact that users may not even know that their data is being trained on, that their data is being used to create some kind of system, a generative AI system for other people to use. I do think from an ethical standpoint, it is incorrect that a user should be unaware of the fact that a company is using their information to train a model to then go ahead and get more income from more people. I just feel like you're taking something that is theirs, their data, and using it in a way that they are not able to consent with. Yeah, and even companies are turning to their own users' data to train AI systems. Google allegedly scraped Google Docs and Gmail for data to train AI tools. And I've seen a lot of arguments about this where the companies are like, well, as long as the data is being used anonymously, as long as we are not revealing who the data comes from, then it really isn't that big of an issue. But I completely disagree with that. I think the fact that you have any amount of introspection into user data and are able to access it and publish it. I mean, when you're creating a generative AI model, you're literally taking the data and reproducing it to later be used. And even if it's anonymized, it is not your information. Companies are saying that, yeah, we are using our privacy policies and we're informing the user that we are going to use their data to train models. Well, I have two primary issues with this. First of all, the updates to the privacy policies are being done so silently that it should be illegal. This goes back to the whole South Park episode, I think, about, the iPad consent form, where if you consented to the iPad terms of service, you got sent to the human centipede style activity, right? Nobody reads the privacy policies. And the argument from like a legal standpoint is like, oh, well, if you don't want to use the product, then just if you don't want to read the privacy policy, you don't have access to the product. The problem is we have a set of like 6 or so companies that literally gatekeep access to all information. So with that being said, if you don't want to read a 500-page privacy policy that on page 294 says we're going to use your data to train generative AI, then you're just fucked and you can't like participate in society. I feel like that is a huge problem that we're not even addressing. And so the FTC has addressed the matter, stating that it may be unfair or deceptive for companies to adopt more permissive data practices, but only inform customers of this change through an amendment to its privacy policy. So 100% with the FTC on this one. I wish they would address it a little further and maybe like come up with some kind of ruling that you have to state, because like, you know how like GDPR or GPDR, if you are using cookies on a website, you have to like declare you're using cookies and they have to say like, yep, I consent to this. Now, while I don't think that actually does anything for anybody, I think if the website is going to take any data you provide it and use it to train a model that will later be used on other people, that will be used to generate content for other people, that should be public information. You have to literally press, yes, I consent to this explicitly. It should be readable by a 5-year-old. It should not be stuffed into the middle of a privacy policy. And this is exactly what happened with AI at Twitter, by the way, X, formerly Twitter. They silently, in October, updated their privacy to indicate that it will allow third-party collaborators, so basically another company can come in, suck up all this data to train an AI model, unless the users opt out. And also, it's not just training like an AI like language learning model, it's training a generative AI model. Like this should not be allowed to happen. I think these practices are shitty, and it's just uncontrolled billionaire capitalism with these like 6 or 7 companies that are just trying to slurp as much money out of an otherwise non-innovative, kind of stale tech market, right? Intellectual property, I think, is the more hypocritical topic. The use of generative AI being trained on other people's art, writing, etc., is a huge problem that I think needs to be legislated immediately. So the background here, advances in AI have introduced new issues for intellectual property, raising questions on how the ownership, creation, and protection of art, writings, brands, inventions, and other creations should be treated. Generative AI technology, which we don't know, is when you take art or writing or anything that already exists, you train a model on that data to enable it to produce similar data that is like that model, that is part of the system you've created, has become more adept at tasks resembling human creativity, look at Sora for example, raising further questions about how works created by generative AI could be treated under our IP laws. So they go into the IP laws. I won't break this down for you, but in US law at least, you have 4 primary pieces of intellectual property law. You have patents, trademarks, trade secrets, and copyrights. The big 2 here, at least from my perspective as not only a programmer and a content creator, are trade secrets and copyrights. Now, I'm not going to read this for you, but the big 2, again, trade secrets and copyrights. A copyright is a protected original work of authorship during the author's lifetime and for a limited time afterwards. So literally, if I were to go into Paint right now, let's do a little art together, okay? Right? I'm going to go like this. I'm going to take this marker, I'm going to go like this. We'll do a little bit of this. I'll put an X for X, and then I'll put like a smiley face, and then I'll do like a thumbs up that's maybe looks like a dick, and so do some fingers. I don't know. Okay, this is my art. This is my art, declared, done. This art, unless I surrender my copyright, is copyrighted to me for 125 years or 25 years after my lifetime, whichever comes first. Okay, this is mine. But if I wanted to show it to you, if I wanted to put this on a website like X, formerly known as Twitter, by the way, right now, this piece of my art would be ingested into a generative AI model and then be used by those websites and the other third-party people that are there taking the data to generate art that is similar. And then also, trade secrets include any information maintained as secret or having commercial value, and for which reasonable steps have been taken to protect and keep them secret. This is my big thing with the world of, asking AI to do code reviews or asking AI to generate code for you. You are literally revealing company trade secrets most of the time, and they are probably using that data in the background to enable a generative AI model that may take your trade secret as part of the model. I literally saw a post on, I think it was on Twitter, where Melky, if you don't know Melky, I'll put his YouTube channel down in the comments below, but one of his lines from his Go blueprint, which is his GitHub project on how to start a good Go project, one of his lines for that project was included in a response from ChatGPT on how to do a thing in Go. They're literally using his code as a model response. Did he consent to that? I'm not really sure. Does he consider what he's working on a trade secret or a copyrighted work? And did that get violated by the AI? Potentially. And so this article goes into the IP issues addressed by AI, or raised by AI. The rapid development of generative AI in particular has raised a number of IP-related issues, primarily in 4 fundamental areas: the ingestion of IP-related works for training AI systems, the implication of IP rights and availability of IP protection, transparency of training functionality and outputs of AI systems. So some commentators, including many content creators and other copyright owners, and again, any art that you make, that if you have not surrendered the copyright, you have a copyright on it for that length of time I specified, assert that using copyrighted works for AI training purposes constitutes infringement and is not fair use. I completely agree with that. If you are taking a copyrighted work and you are using it to train a model, I think you are violating a copyright. They argue that training uses entire works. The works are reproduced, even if only temporarily, and the model's mathematical representations of training data should be considered reproduction or a derivative work under copyright law, and that the relevant purpose is the overall purpose of the AI model, such as when the model is itself commercialized or used in commercial products or services. They are ingesting trademarks, and they are using that for a commercial profit. They are, the creators in this paragraph are asserting that that is copyright infringement. Now, in contrast, other commentators, including many AI developers, shocking, the ones that need to make a buck off AI are the ones that are countering that, assert that using a copyrighted work to train an AI model is fair use and is not a reproduction. Thus, they argue the training is not copyright infringement. They point to the transitory nature of any copy data, noting that the data is fed into an artificial neural network, but typically not retrained. Further, they argue that using a copyright-protected work during the training of an AI model has no effect on the value of that work. I don't understand how you can make this argument when the most of the time the end state of training a generative AI model is for commercial purposes, and you are using the copyrighted work as the basis to produce work that is similar. If you wanted to create work that is creative, that models the output of an artist or of a painter, for example, if you have to use paintings to train that model, you are literally stealing from that artist. And if you want to do this, fine, pay them some fractional dividend as a function of your mathematical model in exchange for using their copyrighted work. Give them a fair license for their copyright. It does not make sense to me. So what are the key findings regarding intellectual property? Key findings is unclear whether legislative action is necessary in some cases, and a number of IP issues are currently in courts due to the rapidly shifting landscape and tremendous uncertainty of AI's impacts on IP. Congress should exercise caution when considering legislation related to AI and IP. I literally don't understand how you can say this when we actively have websites, one being Twitter and one being YouTube, by the way. YouTube also having a new feature where I can consent to my YouTube video being slurped up by a third party to train a generative AI model. To do what? I don't know yet, but I don't think it's going to be in my best interest, okay? The lack of law making that illegal from a copyright infringement standpoint, and then for them to also say that it is unclear whether or not legislative action is necessary is absolutely baffling to me. Generative AI poses a unique challenge to the creative community. Yes, obviously, we're literally seeing artists get screwed by multiple companies, one of them being Twitch, actually, recently. By the way, Cat in the chat was a recent scandal, I think highlighted by Pirate Software, among others, where if you look at this, this is a very obviously AI-generated emote that Twitch decided was the perfect emote for this holiday season, despite having literally an army of creators that would probably pay. You could pay them, like you could have a contest, you could have them make an emote, and whichever one looks the best, you give that person $500, you give them front page access or something. But instead they have this AI-generated cat, which obviously came with a lot of backlash. And so who wins here? You know, Twitch doesn't win because they fucked up from a PR perspective, and then the creators don't win because the people who are literally trying to make a living by doing art are not able to do so. Okay, so does this pose a, you know, an existential issue? Is there a unique challenge to the creative community? Obviously, like this is obviously a problem. It is often difficult for creators to know if their copyrighted works are being used by AI developers. 100%. Again, back to the privacy policy piece up top. It is you almost never know if your data, if your video is being used to train an AI model. Like right now, when I upload a video to YouTube, I am giving YouTube a license to that video. I'm giving them the video, like they basically own it, and I get paid royalties on that. I get a 1099 at the end of the year for the ads that they put on my video. So in theory, you could argue that YouTube owns my video, and YouTube is going to internally generate an AI model of me, or some kind of generative model off of me that could be used in the future. So like, do I have any control of that? And the thing is, I have no transparency about that. Back to the privacy policy piece, I think you literally should be legally required to tell people, when you put any data into this platform, it is going to be used to train an AI model. I think that has to be legislation. And they go into some stuff about China and Europe and all this other stuff, not super important for this video. So recommendations: clarify IP laws, regulators, and agency activity, appropriately counter the growing harm of AI-created deepfakes. Yeah, so there's a whole section of this paper I'm not going to read, where politicians, rightfully so, are worried about how the deepfake era, the era of fake videos of people, affects politics, in particular elections, right? You know, because this is, you could argue that it is a First Amendment violation to delete those videos, but at the same time, if you're making people say things that they didn't actually say, are you violating the right to identity? It's just a whole bunch of issues. Anyway, guys, I think you should give this a little skim. You know, this is extremely long. You don't have to read the whole thing. Go to the table of contents, maybe find an area that you find super interesting. The only way that the human race, that is not the billionaires, wins in this scenario is by knowing the current state and the proposed state of legislation as it applies to AI, and having our voices rose up. I hope that this video does something in that direction. It kind of speaks on my thoughts on it. The current smell of this paper feels very like, oh, AI is great. Like, AI is fine. There's just some quirks in the system. I have yet to see a meaningful problem be solved by AI. Like right now, I use ChatGPT as a quicker search engine. Like, hey, go find me the way you do this in Go, or like, hey, go find me the latest trending YouTube video or something like that, right? But like in terms of like, we're gonna rework education. Like, dude, we've been defunding education in the US since the 1970s, and you think we're just magically gonna like use AI to unfuck that whole situation? It's crazy to me. Anyway, guys, that's it for now. If you like this video, do me a favor, hit subscribe, press it right down there. It's so simple, it's free, it helps me, it makes me happy. And then go watch this other video that I think you will also like just as much. We'll see you there. We'll see you in that video. Take care. Goodbye.